Hi, this is Quinn with SF Indie Fest, and I am here with Paul Osborne, the director of Fluorescent Beast. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Quinn.
Really appreciate you sharing the film with SF Indie Fest, and looking forward to getting into it a little bit. So I guess, can you, as the thing I was kind of curious to hear from you is like what your own personal experience has been with writer's block.
uh yeah, well, writer's block comes when you sort of have to be creative, now, right now. This is your window, this is it, right now, right now, right now. And you're putting so much emphasis on this being perfect. That's really what writer's
Hmm.
block is the inability to sort of let loose and kind of be unafraid to make mistakes and be creative and let things flow. When you start having to be word perfect, and make it count, nothing but
Hmm.
writer's block follows. So honestly, the way I beat writer's block in the past is I try to write in as much mad volume as I can. And I try to find specific windows where I'm like, I can just power into it. And just don't be afraid. And I use palette cleansers. What I'll do is I'll say, I'm going to write something insanely stupid. I'm going to write a film up called Machete Wielding Lesbian Zombie Vampires, and I'm gonna write that in 8 days. And you write something that's just so like ridiculous, exploitation, silly, anything goes, doesn't matter. You spit that out, and all of a sudden you feel like you're free. So that's
Hmm.
when my writer's block thing is when I have to like just go count.
And can you kind of have you ever like experienced in your life the same dynamic of kind of being in a crushing job and trying to get through something, but just knowing that you can't, there's something about it that's just going to prevent you from ever like being able to kind of move forward in your creative endeavors? Is that autobiographical at all, or is it
That element of it is, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for sure. But I think everybody who, an artist who works a day job, even if that day job is also in the arts, but
Mhm.
you're a slave to not your own creative impulses and not doing the thing you want to do. Um, I think, yeah, I think it's a fairly common thing. I've certainly experienced it. I used to work cutting movie trailers, and that was like,
Mhm.
trying to write,
Yeah.
and that was sometimes 16 hours a day, at the behest of studio
Jesus.
executives whenever they
Yeah.
want. And like, you just never you can't form a coherent thought in your head
Right.
of your own. So,
Right. They're not there to nurture.
right. But then, you have kids. I mean, the whole point behind this
Yeah.
movie is sort of, but this movie's not meant to be taken literally, obviously. It's,
Yeah.
the idea is, what if all the pressures of being an adult were not actual, just the happenstance of modern living, but were instead a conscious conspiracy designed targeting your soul, your creativity, trying to crush you personally, Quinn. Like, that's kind of the premise here. Um, the idea that, we had some scenes that were sort of omitted in the
Hmm.
film where Shell is trying to remember how he met his wife, and he can't. And Meg is also trying to remember how she met her husband, and she can't. They've just always been there. Like, it's always been placed there.
Right. Yeah. There is a kind of a feeling in there that this is just part of this continuum of
Yeah,
life that you've been
yeah.
kind of, dropped into.
How did you meet her?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've always been married to her. It's like this weird. In the whole film, we try to take a surreal approach. We spend a lot of time
Yeah.
removing things like trademarks and logos from real companies and replacing them with our own logos and trademarks. So it would seem surreal. Most of them actually are this little tree thing, which is
Hmm.
the Hayden Corp logo. It's on the wine, it's on the coffee, it's on the sodas,
Yeah.
it's on like as many things as we could get it on in the
Yeah.
film.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a kind of an ambiance that's created of this kind of very sanitized kind of branded identity that, they're all kind of living in,
Corporate.
and very corporate. And I was kind of curious, or can you just kind of take me through a little bit of like the beginnings of the genesis of the film, like how you started to kind of bring it together, and then how you and then I'm really interested in the casting process of how you came to kind of
Oh,
decide
sure.
on your leads and all these different folks.
Sure. Well, the genesis of the project is dumber than than you'd think. So the scene in the film, the scenes in the film where he has the dreams,
Hmm.
right? That little weird, like closed off behind a garage garden area. That's a real place. Well, obviously it's a real place we filmed there, but that's actually at my house in LA. That was this little, we had this little like undeveloped hatch behind our
Hmm.
garage. My wife went in and she had it paved and she put in this like this lighting and these seats and made this little seating area. And I'm like, wow, this is such a weird, we should film something back here. So I
Hmm.
started coming up with the idea of these reoccurring dreams where the guy's facing off against his doppelganger, giving him the most annoying little like, anecdotes for a living that are completely useless and
Hmm.
annoying and stupid. That's honestly where it started. And I think I'm not sure at what point, I honestly don't remember at what point I kind of came up with the idea that he's on this circle and that he's going through this process. Um, and that he's, where the story came out. But I mean, it started with the dreams. That was the nugget. I think the next nugget was actually the memos because they got a similar cadence to it. That the boss is always giving these memos and he's in different places.
Hmm.
And the story grew out of that, and obviously grew out of at least a semi-autobiographical place. Originally, Shell was going to be female, actually, and then
Hmm.
I thought, because I think women are actually under more pressure, especially
Hmm.
working moms, because the traditional at home they're still expected to, a lot of them are expected to still be the traditional primary caretaker, primary, house cleaning
Hmm.
person, house, managing person, but also work a job. Um, but I decided that I was worried about being disingenuous. I was worried about like about speaking for women,
Hmm.
about mansplaining what their lives are like. And so
Hmm.
that, I should make this about a heterosexual straight white male who lives in the suburbs, which is me, and go from there because that I know and I can speak to it specifically. I'm not speaking for anybody else.
Yeah.
Um, the casting process, weirdly enough, none of the actors auditioned. I cast everybody because they were all actors that I knew, knew their
Hmm.
work, or I knew them personally, or I'd worked with them before.
Hmm.
Um, I've this is my fifth feature, and I kind of have a rolling directory of actors that I want to work with or want to work with again in my head. Like I just, I work with
Hmm.
actors and I work with them again. I kind of having this little troupe, little company of
Hmm.
actors. And also, as I take the films on the festival circuit or go to other movies, I see other films with actors that are like, I like them. I like that actor
Hmm.
too. Oh, they're really good. And then I meet them at the after party. Then they're my friends, like, oh, and I've got more actors in the stable. So
Hmm.
um, in this film, for the most part, like I wrote the lead with John T. Woods in mind. I wrote the Meg with Don Brody in mind, and most of the characters are written for them.
Hmm.
And with the ones that aren't, the very few of them, I tended to like, I still pulled them out of kind of my corral of talent.
Hmm.
Does
Hmm.
that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting background into that aspect of the casting. And I was curious, like with the wife, character.
Mhm.
I mean, she was making such kind of interesting and unusual choices in her delivery. Was that something that you kind of came to together, or was that something that she was just kind of suggesting?
Um,
Like, no, I would think that she would kind of behave this way and have this
that's
kind of
kind of how she
completely.
was. That's how she was on the page.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I it was difficult for her actually.
Hmm.
She for Megan to do that part because it requires this very affected, non-naturalistic acting
Hmm.
approach. I said, she goes, "What's she like?" I said, "Well, she's basically Siri. She sounds
Hmm.
like Siri." And you
Hmm.
can't, and there's like a strange hint of judgment in everything she says, but all like you
Hmm.
can't quite
Place
divine.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just, and it's very direct. And so that was what you did. And she was really worried. She was like, just let me know if it's coming off too robotic or bad acting or, and I was like, no, it's going to be terrifying. And then what we did to help her, and then this was something we'd planned from the beginning,
Hmm.
was that we removed all of her blinks in post. We went
Oh wow.
every shot of her where she blinks, it's
Yeah.
been digitally removed. So her eyes are never closed on camera even for a frame in the entire movie. And
Right.
so she's got this very staring. It's you don't quite put your finger on it when you watch it, but it's I'm hopefully it's unsettling. I know it scared my
Yeah.
son when
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
he was watching me cut it. He's like, "There's something wrong with her. Like
Right.
she's scary." So
Yeah, it definitely had one of those kind of uncanny effects where you're like I know that there are things that I'm consciously registering as being
yeah,
a diversion um from
yeah, she
normalcy, you know what I mean? But
right.
the blinking thing I didn't put together, you know.
Yeah, but it's hopefully you don't
But,
notice it, but hopefully it's unsettling. She's
right.
the idea was that she's a robot,
Mhm.
Literally,
Right.
and
And
that
it
she's
starts to make you kind
replaced,
of yeah.
right,
And
to
it
keep
makes you
them in
kind of
line.
question what the rules are in the, you know, in all of these different kind of
Right.
um, uh, universes that are kind of
Yeah,
being inhabited, you know,
exactly. But
by this fella.
she's there to distract him, to keep him on edge.
Right.
Um, One thing I don't know if you know, so there's a lot of little things like this in the movie, like the fact that they always wears the same clothes. Everybody always
Mm.
wears the same clothes. I mean, they have a
Hmm.
nighttime and like a sleepwear and a daywear version, but every character
Hmm.
kind of is wearing the same thing throughout
Hmm.
the film, no matter what, which is weirdly something I got from my watching the Power Rangers with my son. If you
Oh,
watch those
interesting.
shows, those kids never change their clothes, except, I mean, when they're in their street clothes. No matter what is happening, they're always in exactly the same street clothes. And to the point where I'm like, I finally noticed it was like took like a couple of seasons. I was like, are they
Hmm.
homeless? What happened? They're
Yeah.
always wearing the silver jacket and the yellow pants, no matter what's
Yeah.
happening. And
Yeah.
that's unsettling. It made me unsettled. So I incorporated that into the thing. It was also very easy to keep track the wardrobe. We
Yeah.
tended to have, four of everything. And then what's the wardrobe for this scene? Well, it's the blue jeans, the blue shirt, the jacket, you
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's so many kind of attention to detail that that kind of make create this kind of feeling of being kind of questioning all the time what's going on, you know.
Yes, that is the
Um,
plan.
yeah, yeah, it was very well done. Do you have like particular influences that you can kind of speak to? You know, I definitely saw some things that I was like, you know, I wonder, you know, where you were kind of pulling from, but who are you kind of like interested
Oh,
in, either thematically or just
I'd be really
stylistically?
curious to hear who you saw if I was pulling from. I mean, the two touchstones for the film that we had a screening at
Hmm.
my house before we started production with the keys and the key crew and the actors. We screened a double feature of After Hours and Barton
Mm,
Fink, and those
yeah,
were our two touchdowns.
Barton Fink was definitely one of the ones that I was thinking
Yeah,
about, you know, and
good.
which is and then of course like some of the films with a lot of dream logic, like
Sure.
you know, David Lynch and
There's
things like
definitely
that.
some
But
Eraserhead in there. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
Eraserhead is the baby version, where he's got a baby that won't go away. It's like the same. It definitely sit on the same shelf, not in the
yeah,
same universe of awesome. That's in a great movie, but always something to aspire to. But yeah, for sure, that's definitely some Lynch in there. Honestly, like it was funny. Like I've been trying to write something because most of the stuff I write tends to be crime fiction or dramas, and
hmm,
there's an adherence as a writer to, it's suspension of disbelief.
hmm,
You want to make believable characters and you want to have them react believably in a world that functions. So even if it's a science fiction world, there's
hmm,
rules, they're concrete, you set them up and you live by them. And so it's very hard to do something that's surreal or that takes that dream logic jump, but that doesn't seem like a mess. And
right,
I for like a decade, I was like trying to crack out how to do it. So I watched David Lynch and I'm like, I want to do that. I want to
yeah,
how do you do Mulholland Drive? How do you do those? And it was something that Brian De Palma said in an interview, which
hmm,
somehow it clicked something in my head because he does it too with some of his movies, not to the same degree, but he said, I'm attracted to unrealistic ideas. And for
mm,
that sentence, I don't know why that sentence
hmm,
clicked something in my head. I was like, oh, oh,
hmm,
okay. Unrealistic ideas. Okay. And I don't know, that cracked it for me. So you have a film here where a guy walks into his own dream and there's
hmm.
no version of any kind of explainable reality where that makes sense, but hopefully I feel like hopefully it makes sense on screen.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting to hear you say that you come from a background where you've been kind of interested in crime and more thriller kind of
Sure.
films. I don't know if that it describes some of
Yeah.
your previous work, but I felt like even though there is, surrealism and dream logic, like there's a lot of attention to sticking to a forward momentum that is all. I mean, I always felt like I was in um good hands and was being like told a story even though I didn't know where that story was going to go. And I was
Okay,
wondering if you
good.
could kind of talk about like finding that rhythm in the edit room, and like how were you kind of working to kind of make sure to kind of keep that momentum going in a way that made sense, and were you pulling in people to kind of help give feedback along the way to kind of make sure that you were on the right
Um,
course?
Honestly, that stuff starts on the page for me.
Hmm.
This, if you read the script for this, it's pretty close to the final. I mean, there's some
Hmm.
trim downs, but it's pretty close to the final edit. I don't think we omitted any scenes. We trimmed some.
Hmm.
Um, but for me, on the page, if it's not moving something forward, I'm not sure why it's there. A professor of mine explained it really well in film school. He said, screenwriting professor, he said, your film takes place over however long it takes place over years, days, weeks, whatever it is.
Hmm.
You're choosing 120 minutes or 90 minutes in this case. You're choosing 90 minutes out
Hmm.
of 2 weeks or whatever it is to tell your story. Choose wisely. And
Hmm.
so that that idea, of not having fat, of really every scene is getting you to set the next thing, getting to the next thing,
Hmm.
building the next thing. That starts on the page. In terms of getting it working in the edit room, um, you just, if the scene's hanging up, you just keep it moving, keep it going. The thing with this movie, it's got a little bit of there's a lot of dialogue, and there's a kind of a music to it, kind of rhythm to it. And
Hmm.
the other thing that I find is helpful is that, and I'm guilty of getting too precious about it,
Hmm.
um, is letting that music play out. That's sort of the fun. You don't want to just
Hmm.
make the scene about getting to the next story point, but make it kind of fun to get there. And so sometimes some of that back and forth, or some
Hmm.
of those little ridiculous things we do, are there to color it, but ultimately to guide you. And
Hmm.
if there's anything to cut, is anything that's fat, it's usually, unfortunately, in that fun stuff. Um, I work on the cut as much as I can by myself until I really feel like I've got to a place where I don't know what to do anymore. And
Hmm.
then, so usually late, because I feel like if I know that scene's not working, and I'd rather work on it myself and figure out what it is before I get it in front of someone's eyes until I really, really can't crack it. And so the cut that I think went in front of everybody else, which is usually the producers, some of the actors, a few key trusted people, um, usually I think this movie was about maybe a minute longer than it is now,
Hmm.
and wasn't too
Wow.
further of a state. So I mean, with this one at least, there wasn't a lot of hankering once we kind of got it to our test audience, which
I see.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so what has like, and now that you've been showing it to people, like what has been the experience of kind of sharing this movie and having it be out in the world, and has it kind of are there people that are kind of recognizing themselves in the main character?
Yeah, there are for sure.
Yeah.
Every screening I've been to, there's always someone in the Q&A goes, I work in the pharmaceutical business, and this is
Hmm.
exactly the corporate speak I'm dealt with every day. And I used to be a dancer, and or
Hmm.
there's always several people, and usually the filmmakers in the audience are always like
Yeah.
borderline upset
Yeah.
at what's at watching the, oh my god, and then he erases it and he throws away his manuscript.
Yeah.
Um, what surprised me most is I think I was aiming for a comedy. I was aiming for something that's
Hmm.
funny and silly and Barton Finker After Hours, frustrating, but certainly light. And I found a lot people are taking this way heavier
Hmm.
than I
Hmm.
expected, more emotional, more like impacted, like, oh my God, I
Hmm.
watched the end of the credits, and at the end of the credits, I don't know if anybody noticed, there's a thing at the end that has, don't give up, to artists
Hmm.
everywhere. This film is
Hmm.
a cautionary tale.
Hmm.
And you're like, oh, thank God you put that at the end, because oh, I can't, I was
Yeah.
so I meant to make something that was fun and light, and maybe you see you recognize yourself in it. I didn't mean to make, like James Caan in Misery,
Right.
Like,
Well, I think there's a phrase that David Graeber uses to talk about jobs that are kind of meaningless,
mm.
and it's spiritual violence, and that's I kind of kept
Oh,
thinking about that.
that's great. Yes,
that that phrase is
exactly.
like this is what this guy is immersed in, the spiritual violence of this job.
One of the most fun
Um,
things was, because we're shooting in 4K,
yeah,
and you never know what anybody's gonna be able to read when they get
yeah,
the movie at home. So
yeah.
all the memos in those offices are all they're not just they're all proper memos, and so you can actually pick up and read any of them. And the most fun we had was writing all these
Hmm.
memos from all these characters, is listing of like weird holidays on the walls and strange
Hmm.
phone lists, and there's all this crazy stuff. You can read all those things, and that was all, creating all this like circuitous techno or circuitous corporate speak was
Yeah,
really kind of
yeah.
enjoyable.
I know that stuff is just kind of endlessly, fascinating, but kind of darkly hilarious because it's like the lived reality of so many people. But um, well, in terms of the next steps for the film and how fans of the film and fans of independent film in general can help kind of spread the word, can you kind of give us can tell us how we can help let other people know about this movie?
Well, I mean, honestly, can you review it on IMDb? Can you
Hmm.
review it on Rotten Tomatoes? Can you post about it? Let your friends know. You can follow me. I'm on social media everywhere as Paul Makes Movies. So
Hmm.
anywhere there's social, if you type in Paul Makes Movies, that's me. If you don't see me there, I'm not on it. But I'm on most of the platforms. Follow me, and we're shopping to distributors right now. And so
Hmm.
fingers crossed we land something, and we're out, towards the end of the year, and hoping for streaming as well as physical media, because
Hmm.
physical media forever. I don't know if you can see behind me, but I'm in my home theater, and that's my
Hmm.
ample Blu-ray collection behind me.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so hopefully we'll have a nice big thick juicy Blu-ray edition of the film with all kinds of cool stuff on it for you. And yeah, so follow along, tell your friends, please rate and review and all the things, and that'll give us a lot of wind beneath our wings.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing this film with SF Indie Fest. Oh, and can you tell me what's next for you? Like, are there subjects you're interested in, or another
Yeah.
film that you
Well,
start?
I'm writing right now.
Uh,
I live in London now, and I live in this kind of weird little kooky neighborhood, and so I
yeah.
don't know what I'm trying to crack the story, but it's definitely going to take place in a quirky neighborhood in England that is not off filmed in. As an American, I just like looking around and going, oh, I just turned
Yeah.
a corner and there's a little eatery, and here's a castle. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's very
Yeah.
strange.
Yeah. You're
So,
kind of living in the past and the
yeah,
present at the same time
right.
over there.
Well, there's a great arts community here, and so I kind of feel like I want to capture this. I feel like if you capture a very specific place,
Hmm.
it kind of feels universal. Everybody's got
Hmm.
their hoods. So,
Hmm.
hopefully, hoping to find, again, trying to crack a story that
Hmm.
that does that. Hopefully, something lighter,
Yeah.
comic, nothing heavy.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Right.